I think our research team has found out something that might be interesting to you. Why was the launch of the Obamacare website such a disaster? We're going to show you what went wrong in the planning process.
Yeah, the rollout of the online healthcare exchanges has been so bad, it's casting a shadow over the rest of Obamacare as well. Paul Strand has that story from Washington.
With thousands of people unable to navigate their way through just the first couple of hoops, the Obamacare website's troubles could well create serious problems for Obamacare itself.
And I think the president has lost enormous credibility because he told people the day before it launched, this is going to be just as easy as shopping for an airplane ticket or shopping on Amazon.
And apparently the test period before the big public launch showed these major issues were likely to happen. Grace Marie Turner heads up a nonprofit organization that focuses on creating a better healthcare system.
They did a test with just a few hundred people around the country going onto the site at the same time a few days before it launched, and it crashed the site. What about the 20 million people that have tried to get on the site since then? They had to know this was not going to work. They went ahead with it anyway.
And all of this has made for headlines about the firm at the center of building these troubled websites, CGI Federal. Turns out its parent company was fired last year after missing 3 years of deadlines to set up Ontario, Canada's Internet Medical Registry. Ontario canceled CGI Group's $46 million contract. A Canadian official told the Washington Examiner they weren't able to meet guidelines to have a product up and running that physicians can use. It dragged on and on. U.S. officials gave contracts totaling $87 million to CGI Group's subsidiary, CGI Federal, to get the Obamacare websites up and running. Now, these officials won't say if they knew of CGI's embarrassing Canadian troubles when they handed out or were administering those contracts.
The Health and Human Services Department decided it was going to be the lead contractor without the expertise to run something that is probably the most complicated website that's ever been created. It's no wonder it's a failure, and I think it's going to be very difficult to fix this.
But CGI has had its successes too, including on complicated software for government agencies. Indeed, a big part of the problem with the Obamacare websites may well be the government itself. The Washington Post reports that the Department of Health and Human Services took years to lay out the final specifications for the system. So CGI couldn't really get started on the complicated websites until this spring. And the government may have way underestimated the cost. On top of that, more than 50 other companies were working on the project. And getting all that different software to work together is very difficult, even when a project isn't very rushed. So while no one's sure exactly what went wrong, there's apparently plenty of blame to go around. From the software companies to the government, which may not have given those companies enough time or money to get the job done right. Which has some critics already asking this question: if the government can't handle setting the website up right, how can it handle all the medical aspects of Obamacare itself? Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
Thanks, Paul. 50 software designers, a company from Canada that had been kicked out of the Canadian system because it couldn't meet the specifications that were needed, and not giving them the necessary data until the spring. How in the world could you put together something that complex in a few months? They can't do it. Now they're talking about having to rewrite 3 to 5 million lines of code, and those, if you ever talk to computer people, they always talk in terms of man years. We don't know how many man years it'll take. But Wendy, it's crazy what they've done.
And I understand that most of the people that are signing up have to because they're sick.
The old and the sick, the young people won't touch it with a 10-foot pole, and well, they shouldn't because it's more expensive. But so what they're doing is going to crash the system because the people who are drawing all the money from health insurance are signing up. The ones who are healthy aren't, and they've got to have the healthy young people. Wow.
Yeah, and then the people's premiums going up by not just a few dollars, but we're talking hundreds of dollars, and that's just infuriating people.
Well, they say once the women start finding out how it's going to cost them, they're going to turn en masse against the Democrats and Obama. And the advice to the Republicans is when your enemy is destroying himself, leave him alone. Well, the website fiasco is creating even more problems for Obamacare's medical plans. John Jessup has that story from Washington. Here's John.
That's right, Pat. Far fewer people have signed up for Obamacare plans than the White House expected. And the Hill newspaper reports that many of the people who are signing up are old and sick and not the younger, healthier, uninsured people that are needed for the system to work. One consulting firm estimates that only about 36,000 people have signed up so far. That's less than 1% of all the visitors to healthcare.gov. Some Air Force officers have made dangerous missteps when it comes to safeguarding U.S. nuclear missiles. The officers entrusted with the launch keys have left the blast door open twice just this year. That's the door designed to prevent intruders and potential terrorists from entering their underground command post. There is also concern an intruder could compromise secret launch codes. Transgressions like these are rarely revealed, but officials did report them to the Associated Press. Increased violence in northern Iraq is pushing Christians out of that part of the country. The Kurdish north was considered a safe area for Christians. The World Watch Monitor website reports that bombings in recent months are causing panic and many are fleeing. Al-Qaeda has claimed responsibility for several of those attacks, and some Christians have been told by local police that they should not be in Iraq because it is Muslim territory. The Christian charity Open Doors says if the persecution continues, there may be no Christians left in Iraq by 2020. And Pat, it is amazing to think that Christians in Iraq are on the verge of extinction, given that they're one of the world's oldest surviving Christian communities.
You're exactly right. You know, I have a friend who is a Iraqi Christian. He's a local businessman. And he said, listen, the Christians like Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein was secularist, but he protected the Christians. And so when we went stomping in there and took him down under what seemed to be rather tenuous circumstances, we left those Christians vulnerable. And when we went back in and they started setting up constitutions, they could have forced a constitution that gave freedom to Christians. They didn't do it. They had a thing in there that Sharia law will take precedence. It would be the foundation of all of our law and so forth. But Bremner, who was our man over there, just in my opinion, was an abject and utter failure. And it was a disgrace. We spent billions and billions of dollars in liberating Iraq, we said, and this is what the result of it is, that the Christians are being driven out of the country. As John pointed out, one of the oldest Christian populations in the world. John?
Pat, a unique exhibition of Bible history opens in Israel this week. CBN News got an exclusive preview of the display in the Bible Lands Museum in Jerusalem. John Waggy has that story.
They call it the Book of Books. The exhibition traces the history of the Bible and the Jewish roots of Christianity, tracking the story of God's written word from the Dead Sea Scrolls to the Gutenberg Bible and beyond.
It's the first presentation of this collection of rare and important Bibles and manuscripts and biblical texts, looking at the Old Testament and the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament together in one exhibition here in Jerusalem.
The significance is that we are trying to show the Jewish roots of Christianity.
Bible Lands Museum Director Amanda Weiss says there's no more important city than Jerusalem to host such an exhibit.
We've put an added effort to make it an equally balanced and important exhibition for both the Jewish audience and the Christian world.
The exhibition begins in the Judean desert. We have a representation here of facsimiles of those Dead Sea Scrolls that belong to Amman, Jordan.
Exhibit curator Heather Reichstadt says the dispersion of the Jewish people in 70 A.D. sets the stage for the exhibit.
We move into North Africa, where we then start to see introduction of Greek, where you have the Septuagint. It's the Hebrew Bible or Old Testament to Christians in the Greek language. After that, we have the introduction of earliest New Testament text.
The artwork on the walls relates directly to the exhibits, and a floor map traces the spread of God's Word throughout the world. Interactive iPads allow visitors to zoom into texts, like this genealogy from Adam to Christ. There's even an exact working replica of the 15th century Gutenberg press, which printed the famous Gutenberg Bible.
And you have a printed page. You could print out several thousand in a day.
We do end the exhibition with one of the oldest biblical texts known to date, which is a blessing from Numbers 6:24 through 26. May the Lord bless you and keep you.
Most of the exhibit comes from the Green family collection, which will one day have a permanent home in a new museum in Washington, D.C. Kerry Summers is chief executive of the Green Collection. He says they want to change the notion many people have that the Bible is not readable.
We take on that challenge to provide a means for people to get comfortable reading it. It's literally one of the great rights of the world. It's fantastic, it's entertaining, it's mystery, it's everything that good movies are made of, are found in the Bible.
John Waggy, CBN News.
NASA says a big asteroid that flew past the Earth a couple of weeks ago almost certainly won't hit us when it comes back in 19 years. The asteroid is 1,300 feet wide, but it wasn't discovered until nearly a month after it came within 4 million miles of Earth. That's because smaller asteroids are harder to spot than much larger ones. NASA says there's only a 1 in 48,000 chance it will hit the Earth next time around. Meanwhile, researchers say they found evidence that a massive comet smashed into the Earth in the distant past. They say it exploded after it entered the atmosphere and rained, quote, a shock wave of fire that obliterated every life form in its path. Scientists think the heat reached 3,600 degrees and turned parts of the Sahara Desert into glass. Pat, that sounds like that could be the prequel to your book, The End of the Age.
Well, you're exactly right. Thanks for the plug. I think that book may not be in print still, but nevertheless, I think taking what Jesus had to say about the last days, so-called Olivet Discourse, and reading it forward, there's no other explanation to correspond to his statements and what's found in Revelation than an asteroid is. I don't think anything else will do it.
This one missed us, but
Yeah.
they're projecting that the next one will still miss us, but one of these days it's going to
The one I had in mind was 1 kilometer, which is 6/10 of a mile. It weighed 3 billion pounds, and it devastated, the whole atmosphere of the Earth, because when it hits, it blows up a huge cloud of dust and debris, and that gets into the atmosphere, and so the sun doesn't shine, the moon doesn't give its light, the crops don't grow. Airplanes can't fly in it because it'll corrode their engines. I mean, it'll shut down a lot of things. And but Jesus said, if these days hadn't been shortened, there won't be any life left on earth. It's a very serious prophetic word that he gives. There'll be no life remaining. But for the sake of the elect, I have shortened those days. So I don't think anything else. You read very carefully about, Revelation chapter 8, about an angel flying in the midst of heaven, and he had a flaming mountain, and he threw it into the sea. I mean, it's all there.
Hopefully that day is very, very far off still.
It won't be fun, Wendy, I'll tell you when it happens.
The White House is denying recent spying allegations from a French newspaper. The U.S. intelligence director issued a statement saying the reports contain inaccurate and misleading information regarding U.S. foreign intelligence activities. The story alleges the National Security Agency collected phone and electronic data from more than 70 million French citizens. Islamic Sharia law will soon be the law of the land in the Southeast Asian island nation of Brunei. The Sultan of Brunei says it should be considered a form of special guidance from Allah. He says the law will be enforced in 6 months, and it could include penalties like amputation for theft and stoning for adultery. The Sultan has been hoping to boost the influence of Islam. Religious minorities in Brunei are mainly Buddhists, Christians, and people of indigenous beliefs. Well, you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.